Hey, welcome back to SNS Grills. I'm Jabin from Postal Barbecue, and today at the grill, we're making some smoking delicious pulled beef using the Slow N Sear Kettle. This recipe is simple to do, tastes amazing, and is gonna be a hit at your next feast, so take a look. As I said, welcome back to SNS Grills. I appreciate you being here. If you haven't yet hit that subscribe button as well as that notification bell, make sure to do so for more great barbecue recipes just like this one. And so today we're gonna be cooking low and slow using the Slow N Sear Kettle to make this amazing smoky pulled beef. And pulled beef is one of those meals that everyone enjoys. It has the texture of pulled pork with that rich beefiness of a brisket. And so when you bring those two together, you're in for a treat for sure. And so today I'm using this 4-pound chuck roast, and I chose this one specifically because of all the marbling that still runs throughout this chuck roast. And it's just gonna add a ton of extra flavor as it cooks, but it is a tough cut. And so we do need to cook it for a long period of time. This is gonna be a full day cook, but when we're done, it's just gonna pull apart and be incredibly tender, juicy, and delicious. So to start this cook, I already went ahead and dry brined it overnight using a half a teaspoon of kosher salt per pound of meat, then placed it into the fridge overnight to allow that salt to really penetrate into the core of this chuck roast, allowing us to have a perfectly seasoned bite every single time. So with our chuck roast dry brined overnight, let's go ahead and season it for today's cook. And so I'm gonna turn it over to start with. Then I'm gonna apply some olive oil to the surface. And this is just gonna be a binder for our rub to stick to a little bit. And then today I'm gonna be seasoning it with our Not Just for Beef rub. This rub goes really great on beef as well as many other things. So we're gonna use that. If you don't have this rub, I'll make sure to put a link in the description box for a homemade rub to help you out. And so we're just gonna apply a nice liberal coating to both sides of this chuck roast. And remember, this rub doesn't have any salt in it, so you can use as much or as little of this rub as you like. Make sure we get our edges. There we go, we're gonna flip it over and do the same to the other side. We'll apply our olive oil. And then again, our beef rub. All right, that looks really nice. And so with our chuck roast all seasoned and ready to go, let me show you how I set up the Slow N Sear Kettle for today's cook. So today we're using the Slow N Sear and drip and griddle pan. And to get that going, I placed in about 12 briquettes into the corner of the Slow N Sear, and I got those coals fully lit. Once they're fully lit, I then filled up the remainder of the Slow N Sear basket with unlit briquettes. I also added hot water to the water reservoir just to add a little bit of steam as it cooks. I then closed the lid and adjusted my top vent about 1/3 of the way open, as well as my bottom vent system was fully closed with a smoke hole also open about 1/3 of the way open. With our kettle now stabilized around 250 degrees, let's go ahead and get this chuck roast onto the grill opposite the coals. I'm also going to place in a digital thermometer into the thickest portion of this meat, right there. And then lastly, I'm going to place in some hardwood over the hot coals. Close that up. So with everything on the grill, I'm gonna close up that lid and we're gonna begin smoking this chuck roast for a long period of time. And we'll come back partway through to give it a spritz if needed and to just monitor the formation of our bark. Our chuck roast has been smoking on the kettle now for about 3 hours, and our temperature has been rock steady the entire time around that 250 degree mark. And so let's open up the grill now and take a look to see if it needs a spritz, as well as just to see how the bark is starting to form. Just look at this. It has some nice color from that smoke, and that bark is starting to set up. It is still a little bit soft, and so I'm gonna give it a spritz just to help keep it a little bit hydrated. Then I'm gonna close up this lid again, and we're gonna continue to smoke this chuck until our bark is fully set the way we like it. It's probably only gonna be a little bit longer, and then we'll come back to get ready for our wrap. It's now been 4.5 hours since I first put this chuck roast into the Slow N Sear Kettle, and our internal temperature has now stalled out around that 160 degree mark for the past about 30 minutes. And so let's open up the grill and just see if it's time to take it off and put it into our foil wrap. Oh, just look at that nice bark that's formed up. You can see that when you press on it and scratch it, it's not coming off. It's fully adhered to the meat. And so this is the perfect time now to take it off the grill and place it into our foil wrap. like I said, today we're gonna be using some foil to wrap this. This is gonna help break down this chuck roast and make it incredibly tender, incredibly juicy. And you could use a foil tray covered, throw some onions in there. I like to do it this way because it keeps it simple and it keeps it cooking at a nice pace. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of beef broth. I'm just gonna place this into this foil. We're gonna wrap it up nice and tight with that double layer of foil, and you can feel on the bottom that moisture that's just sitting there, and this is gonna help provide a little bit of steam as this chuck roast cooks, and that steam is gonna penetrate into the core of this meat a little bit faster than that dry heat is. And so let's get it back on the grill and continue cooking. There we go. And then I'm also gonna take my SNS 500 and place that back into this chuck. Again, being careful not to puncture through to the bottom. There we go. And because we do have a few more hours of cooking left, I'm gonna add a few more coals to the Slow N Sear basket. And so I'm just gonna take my coals and push them over to the one side, then fill up the remaining open space with those unlit briquettes. So with everything back in the grill, I'm gonna close up the lid and I'm gonna allow the kettle to climb up to around 275 degrees. Because our chuck roast is wrapped in that foil, it can handle a little bit higher temperatures. It's also gonna help it cook a little bit quicker. And so we'll come back when it's probe tender. This is usually around that 203 to 205 degree mark. Our chuck roast has been cooking in the Slow N Sear kettle for just under 7 hours now, and our internal temperature has just hit 205 degrees. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up the lid, pull out the digital thermometer, then I'm gonna probe for tenderness to see if it's tender enough to call it done. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my SNS 100 and I'm just gonna poke it into the existing hole here and see how tender it is. And we want it to feel like it's almost going through a stick of warm butter. Oh yeah, this is done. So this chuck roast has the tenderness that I'm looking for, so I'm gonna call it done. And so at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove it from the grill, wrap it in some towels and place it in a cooler for 1 to 2 hours to allow it to rest. And this is an important process when you're cooking large cuts of meat like this. Then after it's rest, we're gonna pull it apart and then we'll get ready for the taste test. So our chuck roast is fully rested and the bark and the aroma is absolutely insane, and I can't wait to get in and pull this apart. And so what I'm gonna do is just gonna grab some forks and just look at how nice and simple this just pulls apart. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some of our juices from that foil pouch and I'm just gonna scoop a little bit of this on. This is just gonna add a little extra flavor as well as add a little bit extra moisture to this pulled beef. All right, that's nicely mixed. I wanna show you some of these pieces. Just look at how nice and juicy this is. You got some of that bark and as well as a nice smoke ring. Again, look at that, oh my goodness. All right guys, so I've looked at this long enough. It's time to go in and have a taste. Let's see how we did. Yep. This is absolutely phenomenal. Oh my goodness. Okay, first of all, every single bite is perfectly seasoned because we did that dry brine process, and then you're hit with the pepper and the spice from the Not Just for Beef rub. This is absolutely phenomenal. You know, everything about this pulled beef is spot on. It's so delicious, and no wonder why it's such a popular way to cook a chuck roast. It's versatile, it's inexpensive, and will feed a lot of people. I hope you give it a try. So that's how you make that smoky and delicious pulled beef using the Slow N Sear kettle. You're gonna love it, so make sure to give it a try, and remember, 2 zones are better than 1.